Good morning. I had to refrain myself from showing you all my dance moves. That's a catchy little dance song there. Um, we talk. So actually, I welcome you here, and let's welcome our friends joining us live from Nipawa. Super good to be with all you today. And we've been going through this series on money. We've been talking about money. And if you're new here, if you're jumping into this series, you're probably wondering, why are we talking about money? What does that really have to do with anything in the Bible or with Jesus or anything like that? And what we've been finding out is that Jesus talked about money an awful lot. He paid attention to it. So for us to be faithful to him, we need to talk about it as well. But have you ever wondered why he had this emphasis on it? Like, he talked about it more even than prayer or faith. So the question is, why? Why this emphasis? And as we've been going through this series, we've been realizing that every time we talk about money, we're not really talking about money. We're talking about our hearts. And Jesus used money as a tool to really reveal what's inside our hearts. He talked about money to find out what's here. And that's the question. What is in our hearts? Is it when we talk about money, is it love? Is it generosity? Or is it fear and anxiety when we talk about it and we feel like we need to put some walls up and protect that heart and protect our stuff? And so when we talk about money, either way, it reveals what's here. And today we're going to be talking about giving. And so we'll be jumping into that, and maybe a question just for us to think about in your head. You don't have to answer out loud, but just in your head. Have you ever felt like you wanted to give, but you didn't have enough? I've felt that like a lot. I just remember, like, you've gone through life and there's been these moments where you really wanted to be generous and you're just like, oh, I can't right now. So I don't know. I think everybody at some point has been in that place. And so here's another question, and just, you don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you, if you won the lottery, would be generous with it? You'd give a good chunk away to something good. And I just believe basically everybody in here would do that. I mean, when I talk to people, I always hear that thing about the lottery. So I actually believe everybody in here would give money away. So my question is, like, what's stopping us? What's stopping us? Is it the fact that we don't have a lottery ticket in our pocket? Or is there another thing that maybe is holding us back? Maybe there's something that has come to become maybe a lie in our life. And, for me, Karis is really good at pointing this out, because she'll say, hey, I want to give some money here. Chris, let's give to this thing. And I'll be like, you know what, let's do that, but let's do that like next month. We'll be in a little bit better spot. Let's give to that later. And then it'll come up again, and she'll say, hey, we should give to this thing. And I'd be like, yeah, let's do that like next month. Like, let's try to, and then eventually she just kind of calls me on what I'm doing. And she calls this, the lie of lack. The lie, really, of perpetual poverty. It's this idea, like, what is enough? What exactly is this quest to have enough? And we have all struggled with that. And really, when we come into that ambiguity of what is enough, we almost feel confused and lost when it comes to our money. So let's imagine we're actually lost for a second. Let's imagine you're lost. Let's imagine you're walking through, you got lost off a trail, you're in the bush, you're lost, and it starts to rain, and you're getting cold, and you're wet, and you're hungry. And in that moment, the truth really is this: you are unhappy. We could pretty much all agree on that moment. You are unhappy. But then you come across this cabin, and inside the cabin, there's some nice people. They take you in, they dress you up, they warm you up beside the fire. Here, eat some hot soup. And in that moment, we go from being very unhappy to being very happy with very little stuff. And that's the truth. The lie that we can sometimes do is that if I have this much stuff, then I'll be this much more happy. If I have this much more stuff, I'll be this much more happy. If I have 100 times more stuff, I'll be 100 times more happy. And Bill Gates lives in a state of perpetual bliss. And so this lie of enough, this lie of lack, this lie of perpetual poverty is a great tool of distraction, of focusing our attention on what we don't have instead of the things that we do have, that God has given us to use and to grow. So let's enter into a story here that's maybe going to help us with this, flesh this out a little bit. And it's a person who's kind of felt like me. Maybe you felt like this before. He doesn't feel like he has enough. And he goes about his way trying to ensure that he gets enough. And he ends up, it's a very interesting story. It's a story where this guy cheats on his boss and he gets praised for it. It's a very confusing parable. But I can see I got your attention now. Because if you have a boss that you don't really care for a whole lot, you're thinking, okay, I want to hear this story. By the way, just for the record, I have a great boss. Just to let you know, great guy. And he's touring Europe right now, and I'm totally okay with that. Not bitter at all. Talking to you, Nathan. No, we love Nathan a lot. But here's this thing. This is this story where we see this guy who really is wondering if he has enough, and he makes his way through it. The context that happens here is this story comes right after we hear the parable about the prodigal son. And at the end of that story, you have a son who owns the whole farm. He owns everything, and he gets very upset that someone's taken a calf to celebrate, one of his calves, to celebrate his brother's return. And it's the ultimate story about hoarding our stuff. And to combat that, Jesus shares this story. We read in Luke 16, in verse 1, Jesus told this story to his disciples. There's a certain rich man, this boss, who had a manager handling his affairs. One day a report came that this manager was wasting his boss's money. So the boss calls to him and says, hey, what's this I hear about you? You know what, get your act together. You know what? You're fired. You're fired. Have you ever been in that spot where you've been entrusted with a lot of stuff? Like somebody just gives you a lot and then you screwed up for selfish reasons? I have no stories like that. I'm going to have to think really hard, or maybe have my wife remind me, but there's one that quickly jumps to mind, and I remember this. I remember being in grade 9, and we grew up in the restaurant. And so I remember I'm in grade 9, and my dad hands me the keys to the restaurant at the end of the night and says, hey, lock up. I want you to take care of the restaurant, lock everything up. And by the way, this is where we put the keys. I keep them in the safe spot, so if you need to get into the restaurant, I hide them over there. I'm like, okay, I can do this. But let's remember a couple things. Number one, I'm in grade 9, so first thing, girls are awesome. Secondly, I want to impress my friends. You put those two things together, what does that equal? Dance party. Dance party at the restaurant. We're going to have an epic dance party. This is going to be amazing. I got the keys to the restaurant, and this is going to be good. And I'm organizing the dance party with my friends, but I'm not doing it like when my parents are there, right? Because I'm a Mennonite, right? We do this in secret. This is a secret place. Secret dancing. So this is very secret. And I start making mixtapes on these cassettes. You guys know cassettes, right? You can make mixtapes. They're so awesome. They're so epic. And I'm making this epic mixtape because this girl's going to be there. So I'm like killer ballads, like Scorpion, Winds of Change, right? Lady in Red is dancing with me. So deep. These lyrics are just... And so I'm making these awesome tapes. We're planning this thing, and people show up from school, and we're just like, yes, dance party. This is amazing. I'm getting ready to ask this girl to dance, and suddenly my dad shows up. Totally busted, right? Like totally busted. So I'm in this moment where I'm just like, oh no, everything's been exposed. I've been entrusted with something, and I screwed up. And that's kind of what's happened here in this story. This guy's been entrusted with lots, and he uses it for his own selfishness. But let's just take this one thing. Let's agree with this, that in order to have real trust, there must be real risk. It's like you almost have to put yourself into harm's way in order to have trust first established. So let's continue with this story. This manager gets fired, and he thinks to himself, now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have any strength to dig ditches. I'm too proud to beg. And he gets this idea. Okay, I know how I'm going to ensure I got lots of friends who give me a home when I'm fired. So he invites each person who owes his boss money and kind of discuss their situation. And he asks the first one, he says, okay, how much do you owe? And the man replies, I owe 800 gallons of olive oil. So the manager says, okay, cut that in half. Just give me enough for 400. And the next guy, he says, okay, how much do you owe? And he says, I owe 1,000 bushels of wheat. Now, me being quite versed in my farming terminology. I could explain to you exactly how much that is, but I don't want to make you guys feel stupid about farming stuff, so I'm just going to keep going and keep that to myself. But basically, he says, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat. And he says, you know what, take the bill, change it to 800 bushels. So he starts to settle his affairs really quickly, and it kind of comes out in the wash what's going on. And here's the boss at the end of it, and he says, the rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. And it is true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than they are with the children of light. Here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and to make friends. Then, when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. If you are faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones. But if you're dishonest in little things, you won't be honest in greater responsibilities. And if you're untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? And if you are not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? It's this odd story, right? This boss entrusts this guy, and this guy cheats on his boss, and in the end, he gets praised for it. I've kind of missed the point of that. I had to go back and read it a few times. But there's something else that maybe we've missed if you're like me, and so I'll just point it out here. We'll go back to verse 10, and it says this. If you're faithful in little things, you'll be faithful in large ones. But if you're dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. You've heard that verse taken out of context so many times. So let's just put it back into the actual context that we're in right now. And what are we talking about? What is these little things? Some translations say the least of these things, the least things. And in this parable, what we're talking about is money. Money is the context. And really, the first thing that we're realizing is that if we're to have trust in God at all for greater things, the very first step is putting our trust in the very least of things, which is our money, our finances. Step one for trust is money. It's like the baby's first step, but it's a small step, but it's a critical one. So the question remains, like, if we are trusting God for our money, or if we aren't trusting Him for our money, then how are we going to have faith for greater things? How are we going to have faith for greater things? So if you're going through a difficult time in a relationship right now, how are you going to have faith for God for that if we can't even trust God with our money? How are we going to have faith for God for our kids' future if we can't even trust God with our finances? How are we going to have faith for God if you're in school, your education, your career that you're choosing? Is this the right career? How are you going to have faith for that? How are you going to have faith for the spouse that one day you'll marry, that this is the right person? Step one, Jesus says, is the very least thing that we do is to trust Him with our money. And verse 11 says, and if you're untrustworthy, there's that word trust again, Jesus is talking about our hearts. If you're untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? So there's that question I'm thinking about, which is, if I'm not trusting with my money, am I really trusting Him at all? And it's an interesting question. I think sometimes we get this idea in our head that, I don't know, we can sometimes separate physical things and spiritual things. And I've done this too, where we just kind of, we have our stuff and we say, this is the stuff I need for life. This is what I need to make sure I provide and sustain my family, and this stuff sustains me, and this is the stuff I can manage and hang on to. But, you know, I am trusting God for my eternal sustaining. It's a very interesting dichotomy. We make this schizophrenic God sometimes where we're saying, you know what, I need to kind of manage this stuff, but God, you know, because this is for my life here right now, but one day I will totally, I trust you that you will sustain me eternally. And when we start to expose it like that, it starts to smell a little bit, and we realize, we are dividing this up a little bit. So how do we get past some of our fears when it comes to giving, trusting God with our finances? I know for us, this is a story, it's my wife's testimony. So that wasn't supposed to happen, sorry. So I'm not saying anything new. This is something she shares quite liberally. But a while ago, we were really struggling in finances a long time ago, and she really struggled with anxiety for a long time, about 13 years. And so I would come home. I didn't know this was happening. She'd have like bills. Our bills, I'd find all of a sudden like they're like a stack rubber banded and it's like tucked behind the cupboard. I'd be like, wow, like months of unopened mail. I didn't realize that she was had so much anxiety towards our finances. It was just being hidden. So we had to talk about it. We had to try to get our finances in order. And one of the things that really helped us in that time was tithing, believe it or not. Tithing became an amazing relief and from our anxiety about finances. And it's really been a healing story for us where we've been able to just really trust God. So tithing is really just this. It's at the beginning of the month. It's looking at what you have in terms of how much money you're going to make. And right off the top, you just say, God, I'm going to give you this percentage. It's yours. Before I even touch it, before I deal with all these other bills and things that are screaming for my attention, before I wait to the end of the month to give to you, I'm going to just give off the top, and I'm going to go through my month. And so we would do that. We would practice that. And what was surprising for us at the end of the month was that we'd always get to this place where, hey, we made it. We made it. It didn't always mean that we had everything we wanted, but every month it was proven over and again we had enough. And then the next month, and then there it was again. We're like, wow, we have enough. And the month after that, and then a year goes by, and suddenly we're going like, how did we make it through the year? This is amazing. I didn't think we could do that. And again, it just proved that God was so faithful. God loves opportunities like that to prove that He is faithful, to prove that He is trustworthy. And tithing is great practice for us to grow our trust. If we're having problems being generous, it's a great first step. When it comes to things of the law, things like Sabbath or tithing, Jesus says this about the Sabbath. He says, man wasn't created for the Sabbath. I created Sabbath to benefit people. I've created Sabbath to benefit. God believes in rest. God believes rest is important for you. And so He created Sabbath so that we would benefit from a day of rest from our work. It's good for us. And tithing's a little bit like that too. You weren't created to become a tither. Tithing is a great benefit to you because it gets to release the anxiety that we have that we're in control of our finances. And when we get to have those experiences over and over and over again, it just proves God is faithful. So it's a great step because we don't wake up one day in the morning where suddenly, by accident, we're generous. Tithing is a great way for us to start to practice being generous people, to trust God with our as a true provider, and it grows our trust in Him. But in order for trust to go, there has to be a real risk. In order for trust to grow, there has to be real risk. And we really want to become people who, I'd say tithing, I guess, it's a great place to start, but it's not where we want to finish. We really want to become people who give God access. We give Him keys to our whole heart, and we become like Him. And it happens at that moment, just like when your dad hands you the keys to the restaurant, and he walks away and he says, son, it's all yours. You get to decide what you want to do with it. Money becomes a great way for us to practice trust. But how do we use it? And this is really where we get to the kind of the moral of the story of this parable. And it starts in verse 9. Here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then, when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. This boss is watching this guy, and he's not doing things right, but he realizes at the end that this manager that he hired found out the secret of money. And it's to benefit others and make friends. God's not in the money business. God's in the people business. He loves us. And this is a great place for us to start, is being generous. And so we have this opportunity to use our resources. And so I guess here's what we could say. We could say, don't love money and use people. Instead, use money to love people. And it's so cool when you see people starting to wake up and this is happening in their life. They have these examples that happen, and they start to use the resources they have to bless other people. And so here's some examples that have just kind of happened even within our church with you guys. I remember when me and Karis first got our first house, and we got this huge mortgage, and I'm just going, oh man, it doesn't feel like we can give. It doesn't feel like we can do anything. And I remember praying about it, and both of us coming to the conclusion that like we could use our house. Like we didn't have any kids, we had 2 extra bedrooms, we could use our house. If people needed a place to stay, if people needed a place to live for a while, we could open up our house. And so our house became this resource to bless people. And so we welcome people in our home that were just going through a hard time or trying to rehabilitate, or we helped a family that was trying to immigrate into Canada, and there's all kinds of jammed up paperwork that they couldn't get jobs quickly. And so, I remember us this one time, we took in a family of 4, like a 2-year-old, a newborn baby, and suddenly our house that has 1 bathroom has 6 people in it, and it was supposed to just be for a couple months, but it ends up being this year. And we were like, okay, that's different. But what's great, that's a good word, I just used different. But what's great is that, when you use your resources, people see that, and it starts to make them want to do something. And I remember me and my wife, we wanted to go to this destination wedding for our friends in Mexico. And we had just had a friend who said, I have a business, I got a bunch of air miles, and I see what you guys are doing with your house. I'd just like to actually bless you guys. I'd like to pay for your trip and just send you to Mexico based on his resources. That was something that people do when you see you using what you have. There's other examples. You've all experienced one today. You all came in, you parked your car somewhere here, and you got out and you started coming into the building. And we've started to do a parking lot here, and it's not in our church budget. It's not a church initiative. It's somebody who just said, I want to be generous. I want to actually give you a great parking lot so that when you get out, your foot doesn't go in a puddle. I'm going to get a bunch of gravel. I'm going to level it all out. We're going to pave it. It's going to be amazing. And I just want to do that because I have resources right now, and I want to bless people. And we all get to benefit from that. You guys have heard a little bit about the field that we planted. We planted a field last year. There's some farmers who just wanted to be generous, and they said, we're going to grow some crops. We're going to sell them. We're going to donate them into the kids' ministry. So when you come here, your kids have an awesome place that they can come and worship God and just enjoy what's around them. And so that happened again this year. Somebody said, I was donated this field. I was inherited this field, and I would just love to donate to those farmers if they want to do that again. And the farmers are growing crops again, and they're going to donate money to this, and we get to benefit from other people's resources. And in Neepawa, I remember when we were planning the church in Neepawa, we were looking at a building there, and it was a great building. It was out of our price range, but we started talking to the real estate agent who owned the building, and he's like, oh, you're planning a church? Tell me more about that. So we start telling him about our church and what we are and what we want to do, and he takes out his money, and he's like, you know what? I just want to give to that. And he puts down his own money. And then he cuts the price like by a third. And suddenly we can plant a church, and Neepawa becomes affordable, it becomes a reality, and we get to have more friends because of what somebody did in that community. So how do we get to have stories that just sound so big? I think we need to start small. We need to start small by just remembering who you are and remembering what you have. So the question is, who are we really? Like, who are we? Who are you? You wake up every day, and the TV will tell you need this. You're a consumer. Buy this. You walk through the grocery store, you pay your bill. You're consuming. The magazines say you need this. Your phone buzzes. You need this. You're a consumer. And that's what really you've grown up believing as far as we sometimes tend to believe that in the world. The world says you're a consumer, but you're not. You're not a consumer. You were made to be a giver, because if you're a consumer, if I'm just a consumer my whole life, that means I have to go around my life consuming things, and all a consumer can do is pay bills. How many of you guys like to pay bills? Paying bills sucks. Paying bills sucks. And if that's my destiny, is to be somebody who just goes and pays bills, that's a terrible destiny. God's called us into a destiny of being givers. And I like to use the word sower. I like to use the word sower because it implies the fact that you've been given something that you can choose to plant where you want it. You can water it. You can choose to water it, nurture it, watch it grow. And so I like to use the word sower, and this is what this can look like for you. Instead of when you get a bill in the mail, like let's say electric bill, like Hydro, Manitoba Hydro. You get a bill in the mail. If you're a consumer, you just pay that bill, and that sucks. But what's fun is saying, you know what? I'm a sower. I see Manitoba Hydro. God, thank you for Manitoba Hydro. Thank you that they give me electricity to keep my house warm, to keep my family warm, that they're providing warmth for people all over Manitoba. God, thank you so much for this company and the people who work there. And God, would you bless them? Would you bless them even more so that they can give back more? They could even give back even more rebates, that it could become a great commodity to bless our province. God, I want to sow into that company. Would you bless them? And you pay the bill. You don't pay it. You sow into the company. Or a good example is in your workplace when you become a sower. What does it look like? I know this guy who works in a place here in Portage, and he really loves the people he works with, and he's like, how do I bless them? Like, he's struggling with how do I talk to them about Jesus? So he's praying, and he gets this idea, and he just feels like he needs to take his department out for lunch. So he's not the boss or anything. He's just a guy who works there. So he invites everybody. He invites the bosses. He invites the employees. They all go out for lunch. And at the end of the meal, he's just like, you know what, guys? I love you so much. You guys do such a fabulous job. I love working with you. I love the way you treat people. I love what you're doing in this workplace. I just believe in you. I don't have much to give, but I just really felt like I wanted to buy you guys lunch today. Thanks so much. And he sows into those people. And then a few months down the road, he feels like he needs to do that again. And this time, it's for a different department. He doesn't even work in that department. So he has to watch a little bit and see what they do, and he's paying attention to what they do. He's saying hi to people, meeting a few people, and then he saves up a bit of money, and then they go for lunch. And he says, you know what, I don't even work with you guys, but I've been watching what you've been doing, and I love it. I love the way you treat people. I love the fact that you work with this company. I love to watch you be generous. And you know what, I have not much to give, but I just wanted to buy you lunch because I think you're amazing. Like, how long does that take before that starts to change the vibe in the workplace? Like, you walk past that guy, and every time you see him, you're like, this guy thinks I'm awesome. That's awesome. We can make people remember that they are awesome. When Karis and I go to restaurants, we like to sow into restaurants, because restaurants is really where you really, if there's one thing you're doing there, you're consuming, right? You're eating the food. You're paying the bill. But we like to save up a little bit of money, and when we go to restaurants, we like to really have a great time. We save up some money, and I'm already praying months in advance. I'm like, God, here's where I want to go. Is that cool? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, well, God, tell me a little bit about the person who's going to be serving us. And I start to write down some things that I think, the way God sees them, and I want to encourage that person and just really remind them how awesome they are. And so I start writing a few things down. I put them into my phone, and then we go out for supper one day. And then the whole time, we're just in this experience. We're really enjoying the food. We're like, oh, this is amazing. Like, how did you get the bacon to do that? That is so good. And we're just so excited about the food, and we're just having this experience. And this person is awesome. Like, you guys are so amazing. Like, you're totally treating us. We're having an amazing day with you. We're building this person into reminding them that they're awesome. And at the end of it, this is my favorite part. I get to the part where the bill comes, and I'm going, you know what? The food was so amazing. I would pay that in a heartbeat. But you know what? I have a hard time paying less for you. I have a hard time paying that bill unless I give you more than what that bill's worth. Because you made our whole day. You gave us an experience that I won't forget. Like, you're an amazing person, and I just want to bless you. Like, here's the money for the bill, but then I give money that's even more than the bill for the server just to go, that's how amazing I think you are. Like, well, I don't know I just have some things that God says about you, but I just think you're amazing. Thanks so much for being you. And we get to leave that place where somebody's head's just going, what? It's a lot of fun. And, I've been in the hospitality industry a long time, and I can see the way sometimes we do it, and I don't want to poo-poo on the Jesus tracts that people hand out, but I just feel there's a better way to do it. It's not wrong. I just feel there's a better way to do it than leaving a piece of paper and a brochure behind. Like, you can do that, but just make sure you love the person. Because I've seen too many times there's no tip. and there's a track, and that server is going, God doesn't even think I'm worth anything. Or there's a track, and there's 50 cents, and God thinks I'm worth 50 cents. But what if you give them more than even the food? What if you remind them how amazing they are, and you remind them about their destiny? I just feel like if Jesus was in that place in the restaurant, he would just be pouring out his life. He'd just be like, you're so amazing. Like, I just want to give you everything I have. He would just pour it all out for that person and just show them what his love really looks like. When we give like Jesus, we're reminding people that they're worth more than what they do. Like, people leave going, wow, this person, like, this is amazing. Like, you did this for me? Like, who does that? So think about it. Let's change our mind. Let's repent from that thought. We're not consumers. You were made in God's image, and God is a giver. And so when I asked you earlier if you would give if you won the lottery, you're all like, yeah, of course we'd give. You know why you said that? It's because it's in you. It's in your DNA. You were made to give. God is a giver, and he's generous. So let's not wait for chance to have to give, wait for that ticket. Rather, let's put our faith in God, use what we have, and become generous people. We can't keep waiting for God to show up when he's given us his love, he's given us his joy, his peace, his Holy Spirit that lives in us, and he's given us seed that we can use to bless others, to benefit them. And it's powerful. This real world has actually forgotten who God is. They've forgotten that he's generous and that he's loving. And how are they ever going to see it unless we don't walk into those places, the restaurants, the workplaces, and manifest God's love to people and remind them how valuable they are to him. And we can do that through generosity. When you give God the keys to your heart, you get to change the paradigm about how you give. And by what I mean by that is by changing the paradigm. When you become a generous person, you don't have to give according to the rules. It's a lot of fun. You can go and you can leave a tip that's bigger than the bill. That's a lot of fun. You can go into a grocery store and you can leave a tip for the clerk. Well, she's like, well, we don't take tips. I'm like, I know, that's a problem, right? So anyways, I just wanted to bless you because you're amazing. You don't have to follow the rules. You got to break the rules and have a lot of fun with it. You can go through Walmart, and this is fun. Sometimes you just go through Walmart and you get in front of the clerk, and she's like, "What do you have?" And I got nothing, but I'm going to buy this person's stuff. And we start to talk, and I just say, you know what? I just woke up today, and I wanted to be generous because I think you're worth it. And we just have a little chance where I can practice that. Give people an experience they will never forget. So every time they see you, they remember, I'm worth something. That person believes in me. God thinks I'm worth something. Because God is not in the money business. God is in the people business. And giving is a way you can become a part of his business here on earth. And so I love the testimonies that have been coming to us at this church and in Nipawa, some of the generosity, the things that are happening. And at this moment, I just feel like we got to sing about it. So let's sing, let's worship God, and I'll come back up and we'll pray.